The church bells rang out, sharp and urgent, slicing through the crisp autumn air like a cry for salvation. Eleanor Grayson, 68 years old, stood trembling in a borrowed white dress, her arthritic hands clutching a bouquet of wilting roses. She was no bride, not in her mind, not with her silver hair, her weathered skin, and a heart that had long since buried dreams of romance. Yet here she was, standing at the altar of St. Mary's, a last-minute replacement for a runaway bride who had left the groom, Daniel Harper, a 32-year-old carpenter with kind eyes and a shattered heart, in front of a stunned congregation. The whispers of the crowd buzzed like bees, but Eleanor's gaze was fixed on Daniel, who looked at her not with pity or obligation, but with something she couldn't quite name, something that made her old heart stutter. It began 3 days earlier, when Eleanor, a widow who ran the town's only flower shop, overheard the chaos at the church. Daniel's fiancée, Clara, had vanished, leaving behind a note that said she wasn't ready, couldn't do it, couldn't stay. The wedding was a small-town spectacle, planned for months, with Daniel's savings poured into every detail. The humiliation was unbearable. Daniel, a man who'd built half the homes in Willow Creek with his own hands, stood abandoned, his future unraveling. Eleanor, who'd known him since he was a boy delivering her newspapers, saw the pain in his eyes when he came to cancel the flower order. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Grayson," he'd said, voice breaking. I can't face them alone." Something in Eleanor snapped, not pity, but a fierce resolve. She'd lost her own husband, Tom, to cancer a decade ago, and she knew what it was to face a town's judgment. "You won't," she'd said, almost without thinking. "I'll stand with you." The idea was absurd, a desperate plan to save face. Eleanor offered to walk down the aisle, to be a placeholder bride, to help Daniel avoid the shame of a cancelled wedding. It was meant to be symbolic, a gesture to get through the day. The pastor, a pragmatic man, agreed. The guests, confused but curious, stayed. Eleanor wore Clara's dress, altered hastily, and Daniel, in his tailored suit, managed a weak smile as she approached. But when their eyes met during the vows they spoke as a formality, something shifted. Daniel's voice softened as he said, "I promise to honor you," and Eleanor felt a warmth she hadn't known in years. The congregation clapped, some out of politeness, others out of awe, but neither noticed. For a moment, it was just them. The first challenge came immediately after. The town buzzed with gossip. "She's twice his age," they whispered at the diner. "He's desperate, she's lonely, it's pathetic." Eleanor overheard every word, her confidence crumbling. She'd only meant to help, not to become a spectacle. Daniel, too, faced scrutiny. His friends teased him, some cruelly, suggesting he'd settled for an old maid out of fear of being alone. At the reception, held in the community hall, Eleanor felt out of place among Daniel's young friends, her hands shaking as she cut the cake. But Daniel stayed by her side, his hand brushing hers, his laugh genuine when she made a dry joke about the overcooked chicken. "You're saving me, Eleanor," he whispered, and she wondered if he meant more than just the day. The second challenge was deeper, more personal. Eleanor couldn't shake the fear that she was a fraud. She hadn't been a wife in years, hadn't been loved in that way since Tom. Her body ached with age, her mirror showed wrinkles, not radiance. Why would a man like Daniel, handsome, strong, with a life ahead of him, see her as anything but a stand-in? She withdrew, avoiding him after the wedding, refusing his calls. But Daniel was persistent. He showed up at her shop with coffee, sat with her in the quiet evenings, and asked about her life, her love for gardening, her grief for Tom, her dreams of traveling she'd never fulfilled. He listened, really listened, and shared his own fears, that he'd never be enough, that Clara's leaving proved he was unlovable. Eleanor saw the boy she'd known grow into a man who carried his own scars, and her heart began to open, despite her resistance. The third challenge was their own hearts. Daniel felt at first a pull toward Eleanor that wasn't gratitude or obligation, but something fiercer. He admired her strength, her wit, the way she'd faced the town's judgment with quiet dignity. One night, as they sat on her porch, he confessed, "I don't care about the age, Eleanor. I'm falling for you." She laughed, disbelieving, then cried, terrified. "I'm too old, Daniel. You deserve someone who can give you a future." He took her hand, his voice steady. "You are my future." But Eleanor's fear lingered. She worried she'd hold him back, that he'd regret choosing her when her health failed or when society's stares became too much. The turning point came during a storm. A tree fell on Eleanor's shop, crushing the roof. Daniel was there before dawn, rallying friends to clear debris, working through the rain to save her flowers. Exhausted, soaked, he looked at her and said, "I'm not going anywhere, Eleanor. Not now, not ever." In that moment, she saw it, love, not pity. She let herself believe. They rebuilt the shop together, and with it, their bond. The town, slowly, began to see it too. The gossip faded, replaced by stories of their quiet devotion, how Daniel brought Eleanor coffee every morning, how she taught him to waltz in her living room. Their love wasn't without struggle. Eleanor's arthritis worsened, and Daniel learned to help without making her feel frail. He faced doubts from his family, who worried about their future, but he stood firm, saying, "She makes me better." They traveled together, to Paris, to Rome, places Eleanor had only dreamed of, Daniel insisting she deserved every moment. Their age gap, once a chasm, became a bridge, her wisdom steadied him, his energy lifted her. Years later, at another town wedding, Daniel and Eleanor sat hand in hand, now truly married, their rings glinting in the sunlight. The bride, a young woman, asked Eleanor, "How did you know it was real?" Eleanor smiled, glancing at Daniel. "Because he saw me, all of me, and chose me anyway." The crowd around them had long since stopped whispering. Their story had become legend in Willow Creek, a reminder that love doesn't count years, only hearts. The message was clear: love is not bound by age, expectation, or fear. It's found in courage, in showing up, in choosing each other despite the odds. Eleanor and Daniel, unlikely as they were, proved that sometimes, the greatest love stories begin when you least expect them, and they bloom where others see only impossibility.